is Mr. Jim Allister.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. The debate on this group of amendments got off to a very good and interesting start because the Green Party missed their target in respect of Amendment 1, and that, from my perspective, was very welcome. Tonight, Principal Deputy Speaker, I am here to oppose in word and deed the anti-farming amendments of the Green Party, the Alliance Party and Sinn Fein. Having listened to Matthew O'Toole, I'm not sure where I should put the SDLP in that regard, because he certainly espoused espousal for that farming destructive measure of net zero. So we'll wait and see what the SDLP actually do on that critical issue. I want to begin by saying very emphatically that farming is not the enemy of the environment. Indeed, farmers have more vested interest in a sustainable future for our land and all that goes with it than anyone else, and for centuries have been the primary custodians of our land. And it is the ambition of every farmer I know to pass on his land in better condition and facility than he inherited or obtained it. So I do want to refute very clearly the common peddled mistruth that farmers are the enemy of the environment and the villains when it comes to this issue of climate change. But let's be very clear. They are not the villains, but they will be the biggest victims of amendments such as we've seen proposed here today, because it is abundantly clear that the net zero brigade inevitably and indeed deliberately are in the business of devastating our farming sector. And they're doing that with full knowledge, because they have in the KPMG, in flashing lights, the impact of net zero on our farming community. It could not be clearer. It is not as if people can say subsequently, oh, we didn't know. There it is, writ large, in respect. And it tells us that net zero demands will decimate our livestock industry, particularly cattle and sheep, and calculates that there would have to be a staggering 86% reduction in livestock head of cattle and sheep. And that, of course, is total devastation for most farming enterprises, particularly in those of beef farmers who predominantly are within what we've always called the less favoured areas. And one very striking statistic in the KPMG report is that even a 10% cut in livestock levels on a hill farm would make that farm non-viable. That's all it would take, a 10% cut to challenge and threaten the viability of those farms. And it goes on to say that that means that 98% of farms in those less favoured areas would be vulnerable. Think what an 86% cut would mean. It would mean the greatest devastation in those areas since the famine. And yet that is what Sinn Fein comes to this House to advocate. Net zero. That's what Alliance have attached their wagon to. That's what the Greens are saying to these rural communities. Net zero, despite the reality of the devastation that that means. And I really do have to comment on those in this debate who've spoken out of both sides of their mouth, saying, yes, we want 100% reduction, but we're supporting the farmers. Sorry, you can't do both. You simply cannot face in those two diametrically opposed positions. And your voters know it. And many of them, I suspect, will remember it. I was at a meeting, I've been at many meetings about this issue, but I was at a meeting where predominantly those participating probably were those who would have voted in the past for parties today who may be advocating net zero. And they were very clear that this, for them, was the defining issue. And that if their representatives voted as they previously voted, then they take the message that's delivered, that it's only platitudes for them and it's destruction for them through their votes. And I do hope that that message gets through to this House. It was encouraging today to see outside this building with the farmers' demonstration that there were some parties represented who in the last debate on Ms Bailey's second stage of her bill voted for 2045, voted for 100%. Now, I hope they weren't just present today for the optics. I hope they were present today because they have realised what persisting with the folly of 100% and 2045 would mean for our agricultural industry and thus for our entire economy. Because there's no more seminal component of the economy of Northern Ireland than our agri-food industry. It is the one upon which so much is built. And without a vibrant, effective, flourishing agri-food industry, our economy is in deep, deep trouble. And the rural communities that some espouse to have their interests at heart are right on the front line of decimation under this particular proposal. To think about it, KPMG talks about 13,000 on-farm jobs before you even come to the spin-off industries in the processing. That is something that no MLA surely should have upon their conscience when it comes to voting on these matters. Your job might be secure, maybe some less than others, but we're talking tonight about livelihoods. We're talking about the future of our rural community. And it's not something to be played with in pursuit of ticking the right politically correct boxes in this woke age. It's something to take seriously and to make sure we don't pursue the folly that these amendments advocate to us. I heard Ms Bailey say this was all scaremongering. I think a climate activist is the last person to talk about scaremongering. You know, how many in this cult of climate change, how many false prophets have there not been? I remember Al Gore in this century telling us in 2009 that there was a 75% chance within 5 to 7 years that the North Pole would be free of ice. Going back further, we had a UN report telling us in 1989 that entire nations would be wiped out by rising sea levels by 2000. We had the chief director of UN Environmental Programme in 1982 telling us that by 2000, devastation complete and as irreversible as any nuclear holocaust awaited us. So we've had plenty of false prophets within the climate change brigade. Go right back 50 years to the Limit of Growth report and the phenomenal threats that it made. And here we are again told we're in the last chance saloon. Well, I have a very simple question for this House. You pass net zero. You do all the things you want to do. Do you really think it's going to change anything? Do you really think it's going to stop climate change, which has happened through the years? Yes, of course. We should do sensible, necessary, logical things to preserve our planet in the most pristine way we can. But does any of us really think that puny man, by going to net zero, will actually change climate change? So here you are, many of you, going to tick this box, vote for this woke proposal, with no assurance it will do anything, but only with the assurance that it will devastate our agricultural industry. That's what many of you are going to opt to do tonight. And I do have to say to you, it's time that you rose above that delusion, that you, with your net zero, will in fact make that phenomenal difference that you pretend, just as the threats and the Armageddon suggestions of the last 50 years have proved to be true. So this too, I fear, is another false prophecy in respect of all this. So I do appeal to this House. Anyone who cares for their rural constituents, anyone who cares for their farming constituents, anyone who cares for their future, then the very least you can do is vote against these anti-farming amendments. It's not that the Minister's bill isn't without threats. To me, I think it goes too far, but it's by far preferable to that which is on offer from the climate change alarmists in this House. So I say, now is a moment of truth for us all, and I watch with interest as to who stands up for their rural constituents and who wants to put them down and off their land.